Okay, so this is just a small little video to help you get to grips with your loops that we covered in class. And you might remember at the end of the class, I was showing you how you could write out the values of variables on a piece of paper as they changed when you were following the loop. And this should help you understand what's going on. So I'm going to just go back over a little example. We're going to create a loop. So let's go for, we'll create our loop counter variable inside the loop. So we can go for int let's call it num is assigned a value. Let's start at 0 and with semicolon, and then what's the condition that we test to see if we're going to enter the loop or not. So we'll say num less than 5, for example, and we'll go num plus plus. And the num plus plus says add 1 to number every time. Okay, so we're going to close that off. We'll open up our curly brace, we'll put in the closing one, and then in between those two braces, what do we want to repeat? So I'm going to keep it simple, just do print line, and we'll print out the value of the number. So pretty simple loop. If we run the program, you can see it outputs 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at our condition. We started at 0. We said keep going while the number is less than 5. So therefore, if it was equal to 5, it wouldn't enter the loop. So that's when we know we're finished our program. Okay, just to make that a bit easier, println loop is finished. Okay, and if we run that, you can see that the loop is finished once we once the number is less than 5, it'll keep going. When it equals 5, it's finished. Okay, right. So how can we see how that works a bit better? So I'm going to introduce the debugger very quickly, a thing called the debugger. We'll be covering it in the notes, but this just might help you out. Over in the top right hand corner, you'll see, let's put it on up here, you'll see this thing that looks like a little bug. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to press on that, okay, this button here. So if I turn that on, and one more thing, I'm going to see where our print line statement is. I'm going to put a breakpoint on there. And I do that just by clicking on the line number. And you see that it changes to a little diamond. So the line numbers, on line number 2, I want to put a breakpoint. So that's why we have that diamond just there. Okay. Okay. So let's see what happens. We now have, from pressing the button in the top right hand corner, instead of 2 buttons up here, we now have 4. Okay. So we have debug, we have step, we have continue and stop. So I'm going to get you to use the step. So I'm going to step, program starts, and it stops at the breakpoint. And if we look over here, we have now got this pop-up window. And it's saying we've got a variable called num, and it currently has a value of 0. We also have system variables for processing, and if I expand that out, you'll recognize some of these: width and height, mouse X and mouse Y, P mouse X and Y, key and key code, key pressed. We've seen all of those, and we've seen frame rate. There's 2 others there, focused and frame count, which we'll come to in a later class. So the advantage anyway of what we're doing is that we can see the value that's currently stored in the computer's memory for the variable num. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll step again. And what that does is it says print out the value of num, print line num, and that's put that to the console. So that's where the 0 comes from. And we go back around, and you can see that the line that's highlighted right now with a triangle right here. You see the triangle pointing in. That's saying which line is going to be executed next in your program. So we'll step again. And what we've done there is in stepping through that loop, we've said, okay, is num less than 5? If it is, we're adding 1 to num. So it is less than 5, 0 is less than 5, so we've added the 1. So now num is 1, and we're going to print out that. Watch the console. So now we can see we've printed out the 1, and we're back up to the top of the loop. So it's printed it out, gone to the end of the loop, and back up again. Then tests again. Is num less than 5? Well, num is currently 1. That's less than 5. So we add 1 to number, and we print out num. So you can see, you can keep track of the numbers over here, and you can step through the code line by line to see exactly what's happening each time. And when you get to the end, it drops down and prints out finished. Okay. So I'm going to try one more. So let's modify this. I'm going to change num to, let's call it row, for example. And let's do 8 rows. And we're also going to put in a for loop inside the for loop. And this is where it'll become more interesting. So if I was to say rows and columns, so I can have for int col is assigned the value 0. Change that one up there. Keep going while column is less than 8, and increment column each time you go around the loop. So what will be interesting this time is, especially if I put in my curly brackets, and another little trick, go to auto format. We can see the layout changing, so it's easier to follow. So we have loop is finished. Well, we're finished the inner loop at that point. So I'm going to put inner loop is finished. And the outer loop is finished when I get past here. There we go. And again, I'll just auto format or Command T. So if we run this, and I'm going to put a break on the print line statements here, and here, and also here. And instead of just printing out the row, I'm going to print out the row and the column. Okay. So make that stand out a bit. We'll just put in comma between them. So it's print line row plus a comma plus the value of the variable col. So I'm just going to run it first so you can see the output. Of course, I've put the breakpoints on it so you're not seeing it. Let's turn off the breakpoints for a second. You turn off the breakpoints just by clicking on them as well. So this is what the program output looks like. So it prints out row 0, and then it prints out all the columns for that row. Then it prints out row 1 and all the columns for row 1. Likewise for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. After it prints out each row, saying the inner loop is finished, and when it gets to the very end, both loops are finished. So again, if you wanted to see how that's working, we would put a breakpoint. Let's stop that for a second, and we put a breakpoint on the print statements. So we can start our program. We're at the top of the loop. We're initializing. We don't have a variable yet, so if we step, We've created the int row, so we have a row variable popping up. I step again. I now have a column variable being added to the memory, both initialized to 0. So if I print out by stepping, it'll run that print, so we get the 0, 0 down here, the values of the row and the column. And now it's come back up to the loop. And you can see how it steps through. Column's been incremented by 1. And it does the test, steps in, print line, and so on. So I'm just stepping through it so you can see it running line by line, nice and slowly. You can follow the logic. When I get to here, it's now finished. It's gone from 0 to 8, printing out all those columns. And now it exits that inner loop. You can now say the inner loop is finished. And now we're back up to the outer loop where row is going to get incremented. So row is now gone to 1. Notice that column had disappeared because we have block scope. But once I execute this next statement, column gets recreated and it's now 0. And now we'll be able to step through. For each row value of 1, we've now got the columns 0, 1, 2, 7. Okay, so we're at the point where we just printed out 7. Column is 7, so column is going to get incremented because we've completed the inner loop. So column will go to 8 and then it will do the test and fail. So it drops out, says the inner loop is finished. Now we're back around to the outer loop again. My column variable has been destroyed because it's no longer in use. So therefore it gets destroyed when the block scope is no longer in play. Okay, so that's something that you should experiment with to help you see the values. If you can do it on paper, it's better. But this is just a way to reassure yourself how these loops are working. So try this out for the while loop, try it out for the for loop, try it out for the do loop. Remember to set these breakpoints or remove them. And you can step line by line through your program to see what's actually happening. Okay, that's it.